are empty. It actually came from a wedding I attended in 2000. They're divorced now. So, like a box of matches, their marriage was over. Today I want to talk about why you shouldn't major in finance. And I decided to do it outside because I'm sick and tired of the Minnesota weather. I'm just doing it outside anyway. It's like 38. The sun hasn't come out, but oh well. So a lot of you read my blog or YouTubes or whatever because you like economics and finance, and that's good because you should. It's very interesting, and it is important. You should, in theory, be able to go and major in economics or finance and land yourself a good job. But there's not so much a problem with the degree as much as there is a problem with the industry. And I get all these idiots saying, they read about Worthless, the book I wrote. Oh, was economics worthless? Is it? Well, number one, I didn't major in economics. I majored in finance. And number two, I'm intellectually honest about it. Don't major in either. If there's a reason this video should be forwarded to everybody, is because these degrees are the most tricky of them all, or they'll trick a younger person. You'll think that with good logic and good reason, you say, hey, majoring in finance and economics would be a good idea. But when you get into the real world, it's not. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. Let me explain why. Like I said before, the degree itself is not necessarily bad. The degree itself is worthwhile. But when it comes to where you're going to be employed, that's where you run into problems. So you're going to learn very helpful things, very beneficial things for your personal life and for the lives of others, but no one's going to employ you, and here's the reason why. You basically have a hierarchy in terms of employers in the finance industry. And as I'm sure you're all aware of, based on the housing crisis and the financial crisis and the bailouts, the entire finance and financial services industry is pretty corrupt and pretty inept and pretty incompetent. Normally, when you have recessions, crises, crashes, and all that, a recession is like your liver or your spleen or whatever organ is that cleans and guts crap out. It should flush out and cleanse out all the crap, all the inferior employers and employees and bosses and stuff like that. Well, we keep bailing out the banking industry. We did it in the savings and loans. And more recently, we did it with TARP and all that. So, truthfully, half the financial service companies should be gone by now. But it's not because we bail them out, so we never get rid of these morons that populate the banking and financial services industry. Now, this hierarchy, hope that crow ain't going to be here forever. Like I said, it's hierarchical. At the very top, you're going to have your elite investment banking. Investment banks, your Goldman Sachs, your Morgan Stanley, your Lehman Brothers. Oh wait, they're bankrupt. That's right. Despite the infusion of Ivy League talent, they still couldn't predict that housing bubble. Good going, Dick Fold. Those guys are never going to hire you unless you're at Harvard. And let's be very clear. I don't care what people tell you; they will not hire you. And it's not because you don't have the talent. It's a club. It's a network. So unless you're in the Ivy League, and if you're in the Ivy League, yeah, sure, go for it because they'll hire you. But unless you're in the Ivy League, not only do you not have the connections and you're not going to get in, if you don't understand the culture, the unspoken understanding of that East Coast elite kind of world. So unless your name is Shadius Thaddeus Harvard McWinthrop IV. Yes, my dad. He created Plato, and now we live in our yacht. And if you're not one of those guys, you will not understand the cultural and underlying social, psychological dynamics that's going to take to get into the investment banking world. And you don't want to be. Those guys work, 120 hours a week, and they just get abused, frankly. And then they become bitter, middle-aged people, and then they wreak the same havoc upon the young recruits that become analysts at the investment banking world. So you don't want to do that. Below them, I guess in terms of prestige, are your commercial banks, your Wells Fargo's, your Banks of America, and so forth. These large and stable banks, because they're too big to fail, they'll employ you, but they're not going to challenge you at all. They are incredibly efficient. They are incredibly streamlined, and it's their way or the highway. I was a credit analyst at Wells Fargo once, and I just did data entry. That's all I did. If you're smart, if you have an idea for innovation, it will be ignored by these people because and for good reason, because they're looking over multi-billion-dollar company. They're not gonna, no matter how great your idea might be, no matter how many millions it might save them, and add to the bottom line, they're not going to listen to you. You are this little person in a sea of 100,000 employees, and your brain will atrophy when you go there. So you'll learn all this great financial and economic theory. You'll be able to predict bubbles. You'll be able to save Wells Fargo from having to go and borrow $50 billion from the U.S. taxpayer. But you're yelling in a sea of rookie nobodies. So in order to get advanced in those kind of environments and corporate employee places, you gotta sell your soul. I've seen people who have made it, like they're VPs, senior VPs, heads of lending divisions at different branches, and they're gone. That's all their life is the business. They're not fun to hang out with, and more importantly than that, they've lost all independent thought. This is why banks, even the big ones, no matter what talent they hire, they're unable to predict or think ahead or forecast effectively, because they're trained not to think, but trained to obey. So when it comes to thinking outside of the box, you think about that. You do that for 10 years, your brain will atrophy. You will lose all. You'll graduate and you'll be like this really idealistic, and maybe not even idealistic, but thoughtful and creative person. You have these great ideas that are legitimate, but after 10 years of commuting and day in, day out data entry and this mind-numbing bullshit that these large commercial banks put you through, you'll have lost all creativity. You won't be able to lead or do a good job. Then below that, you got like kind of these regional banks. And here you take a huge drop, because if there's any business worth doing, the larger banks have taken it. If there are any clients worth having, the larger banks have taken it. Now, yes, there are some regional banks that have some good portfolios, have some good clientele, and not a pain in the ass to deal with, but they're still a pain in the ass to deal with. You're starting to lose quality as you start to go down this hierarchy, which means, yeah, you might have a little bit more control, you might be advanced a little bit more quickly, but, there isn't training in the Wells Fargo, Bank of America worlds either. It's hit the ground running no matter where you go. But even though you may, like, hey, we want you to do something you were actually trained to do in college, it's going to be for a clientele that's progressively bad. If there's a place to go work and you really, really want to get in finance, I'd say go with those mid-regional banks. But again, there's a significant drop in the quality. Now, below that is this thing called community banks. These are the losers of the finance industry. These are the banks where their employees are the ones that none of the higher-ups wanted. And yes, they may have ideas, but they're still dumber than hell. And making matters even worse than that, you are dealing with the leftover crap that every other bank, 95%, 90% of the banks, in terms of volume and customers, don't want. You have the bottom 5%. You're dealing with the retards of society, which means the majority of your work is not advancing, progressing, making new deals, making new business, making things more efficient. You're just dealing with crap clients. You're dealing with putting out fires. You're dealing with problems. You're never advancing. You're always dealing with somebody else who is fucked up. This is where, excuse me, a disproportionate amount of my time came in. Because I thought, hey, I could go here and move more fast, And yeah, you may have a better title, and you may have more responsibility, but you'll never get around to using it, because you're always dealing and cleaning up some other retard's mistake, right? Be it an employee, who's, that's a very common one. If you're a credit analyst or you're a commercial lender, you go in one of these small little community banks, the first question you should be asking if you're thinking about working there is, what's your problem loan portfolio look like? What percentage of your time is spent dealing with problem loans? And truthfully, it's about 80%, 70-80% is dealing with the loser loans. And it's not like the 80-20 rule. It's like 60% of these loans, 60% of your clients are problem clients. They're criminals almost, is what they're. I remember, here's a story. This will tell you. When I was out in Wyoming, I was at this bank. And this was in one, the most degenerate, fat slob scum of the earth comes in, and we have a checking account with this individual. Well, she comes in with a check that's obviously fake. It was printed off on inkjet. The signature was, and it was for an amount this woman would never see in her entire life. Well, the staff, they're all worked up. Oh, the numbers don't match up. It's obviously a fake. Well, they're thinking, well, let's deal. We don't know what to do. Let's kind of. And I'm thinking, like, get rid of this client, and not just get rid of the client. Let's call the cops. This goes on, and not only that, but several of her associates, all of which share the same number but aren't in the same household, oddly enough, which is another red flag. Bring in this spat. Bring in this odd timing of fake checks of larger amounts than any of these pathetic vermin of the earth would ever see in their real lives. The staff constantly kind of, well, what do we do? Well, we can't do that. And I had enough. I called the cops. This is check fraud. This is bullshit. Okay? We still didn't get rid of those clients. That's how desperate these banks are for that kind of business. They will deal with criminals. Now, if you want to babysit criminals and deal with the mentality, it's not that these employees were low caliber, it's just that that's what they've been dealing with. Is like, well, we can't get rid of clients, even though they're trying to scam the bank. We can't, even though they always have a negative account, they never pay their fees. We can't get rid of them. We're here to help the little people. So if you want to deal with that, that's the next level down. Now, even below that, unless you're going for a car loan, I'll qualify on that one, is the credit unions. Credit unions, I mean, this is the short bus of the financial world, okay? If you want to play patty cake and babysit the ultimate degenerate, community banks will deal with degenerate scum. You are now dealing with purified extract of degenerate scum in terms of clientele and business banking, check. They always bounce their checks. They never file their taxes on time. There's always extension. The businesses never go anywhere. That's your credit unions. And that's just, you're in the psych ward then, man. One flew over the cuckoo's nest. Now, I know that everyone, I bank with a credit union. I'm not saying everyone is like that, but I'm talking for those of you that have to go and work in the financial services industry, avoid credit unions at all costs. You are dealing with not professional people. You are dealing with the worst clientele possible, and you're just babysitting is all you're doing. And that's it. Now, your other option in getting a finance degree or an economics degree, well, finance is just to become a salesman, go into insurance, but you don't need to get a finance degree to do that. You just go sign up at the local insurance agency or realty office and just become a salesman. It's going to be cold calling. You don't need to go to school for 4 years and $70,000 in tuition for that bullshit. Okay? If you're an economist or economics major, which again I don't advise doing, you got really no choice but to go and get a master's degree or a doctorate before any kind of government agency is going to employ you. For the most part, the finance industry doesn't employ economists, which is probably why they keep getting hit upside the head by every recession and every bubble. And they're like, I don't know how that happened. We're so smart. We're Ivy Leaguers. I got my MBA. So if they employed economists, which they're not going to because they don't see the merit in it, well, okay, fine. But the government will. But there, it's not, you're an academician by that time. You're going to go work some government job. You will never be challenged. You just plain won't. I know several economists in the government, they're saying, dude, you do this stuff back when I was 21, I had an internship, I was writing reports in the economics department. And the stuff I was churning out back then was what they're churning out now. They're just 10, 12, 15 years older. So if you want to waste your life to finally get to that level of career challenge and intellectual stimulation, fine. But otherwise, I don't recommend it. Life is too short. So, what I do recommend in terms of finance and economics is, like all things that are liberal arts or humanities, it's very interesting, but finance and economics have practicality on top of it. So I suggest self-study. Khan's Academy. You could go to, I offer classes online. Go to captaincapitalism.blogspot.com, scroll down, and to the left you'll see a picture of me with my captain's hat on. And I do a stock class, and I do a basic introductory to personal financial planning class, and those are good. Certainly cheaper than a degree. But self-teaching yourself everything you need to know about finance, economics, that's really where the benefit is going to come in, because then you could control your own personal finances, you could prepare for the future, and even it's more intellectually rewarding and stimulating because you get to study what you find interesting. Some people like currency trading, some people like bonds, some people like looking at sovereign debt. I mean, you could go all over the place with finance and economics, whatever interests you. I'd strongly recommend reading the Wall Street Journal. I'd also recommend at the beginning starting to read The Economist, but after a year, don't read it anymore because it's progressively becoming leftist claptrap. But they do come up with some good, pretty much economic data and statistics that teach you some concepts. Read through Cappy Cap, whatever. But that's the only real reason you should ever consider going and majoring in studying finance and economics. So never major in this stuff. I know it may be your passion as it was mine. All I did was waste 20 years of my life. I should have gone and done something else. I mean, I would have been way ahead, becoming a contractor, working on cars, building houses, whatever, and then reading about economics on my own rather than pursuing an actual career in finance and economics. So hopefully that helps you. I know you young boys, well, I'm going to go major in finance. It's not going to happen unless, you're Antonio Winthrop III and your daddy already has a trust fund account set up for you, so you don't really need a bunch.